Welcome everybody. We are going up where we left off. We're in chapter 1, part 2. Remember, we just finished talking about opportunity cost at the end of the first part. Now we're going to talk about production possibilities. This is another classic economic principle. Very important that we go over. Once again, setting the foundation for the future chapters. Production possibilities are the various combinations of final goods and services that could be produced in a given time with all available resources. So what are we really talking about there? We're going to use the example that the book gives, and that's trucks versus tanks. One factory can produce either trucks or tanks, or some of each with the limited resources available to it. And that would make sense, right? It's the same type of factory to produce both items. To increase truck production, resources must be shifted away from tank production and vice versa. So you can only make so many trucks and so many tanks. And if you want to make more tanks, you have to make fewer trucks. You want to make more trucks, you produce fewer tanks. Now this is a very common problem with production. Of course, you could always build a separate factory to produce just tanks and then another one to produce just trucks so you can produce more of both. But maybe you don't have the money to do that. So this is a decision that companies make all the time. Electronics companies deal with this all the time. How many, are we going to make more TVs or more monitors or more laptops or more phones? You only have so many resources to go around. So you want to make a decision where you're going to make the most possible money, the greatest amount of money. Of course, the opportunity cost is obvious. The number of tanks, if you increase the number of tanks, the opportunity cost is the trucks that you will be. So we can look at this graph. Now I'm going to step back from the slide for just a second and acknowledge that many of you probably learn very well visually and others may not. So I will always try to explain everything where you don't need to understand the graph. But for those of you that do enjoy graphs, I will use them as well. So you can see on the left it's the output of trucks, and at the bottom is the output of tanks. So at 4 trucks we can produce 2 tanks. And at 2 trucks we can produce, what, 3.7 tanks about. And at 0 trucks we make 5 tanks, and at 0 tanks we make 5 trucks. So what we're going to talk about here is the law of increasing opportunity costs. The opportunity cost of producing additional units of one good increases. So each time we give up a truck, we get less back in tank production. So it's not always a one-to-one relationship. Resources are specialized to produce one good better than another. So good tank resources are shifted first. Later shifts involve resources less good for tank production. Accounts for the bowed out shape of the... I'm sorry for the mix-up on the slide there. This explains exactly what I just did, in that when we give up one tank, when we give up one truck, we get 2 tanks. So what we want to do is keep progressing along those lines. See, and then in the third one is we give up another truck, we get another tank. The production possibilities curve illustrates 2 essential principles. We have scarce resources. There's a limit to the amount we can produce in a given time with available resources and technology. There's that word again, scarcity. So that's a big part of this, because without scarcity, we could do whatever we want, whenever we want. Opportunity cost is the other principle. We have to give something up. Every time we make a decision, we have to give something else we could be doing with that money. When you invest money in the stock market, you're doing that instead of buying a new house or buying a new car, or depending on how much money you're investing, or going to a movie. So as you're looking at points on the production possibilities curve, points that fall inside the production possibilities curve represent inefficient use of resources. Okay? And points that lay on the outside of the curve represent points that are unattainable. We can't produce 2 tanks and 5 trucks. And if we produce 2 tanks and 3 trucks, we're not reaching our potential. Next concept, economic growth. Economic growth represents an increase in output and an expansion of production possibilities. This means that production possibilities curve, our production capability, moves outward, meaning we could produce 10 trucks and 10 tanks. That would be an expansion of the factory, additional capital, a smart entrepreneur who can figure out a better way to produce the tanks and trucks. That's where economic growth happens. Economic growth raises our standard of living, satisfies more wants and needs, and creates more jobs. This is what we're always pushing for. We want economic growth. That's what you hear in the news all the time, economic growth. And this comes from, once again, additional capital, entrepreneurial ability, and motivation. That's a huge part of economic growth, is motivation. What is motivating you to go create something new, to go make a better process, to go find the capital to expand your production? Typically, the big motivator is money. And so that's why when you hear about people wanting to stimulate the economy, stimulate economic growth, they want to provide money to the people who would do these things. That's why interest rates at this current time are so low. So entrepreneurs, people who want to start businesses, can borrow money very cheaply in order to create economic growth. Of course, there's a big counterpoint to making money very cheap. There's a big counterpoint to making money very cheap, and we're going to talk about that later in the chapter. But in terms of economic growth, one of the popular ways to try and stimulate it is to provide more money for people to create growth. Of course, on the flip side, in order to pay for more money, what we've done in this country is increase our taxes and increase the tax burden. So you've got this vicious cycle where we've given people more money to create, but we've charged everybody more in taxes, which drives down demand for the new things that they're creating. So are we really getting anywhere? And over the last 5 or 6 years, where we've had a real economic malaise, starting with the Great Recession. Hopefully you've all watched that video at this point. We started with the Great Recession, and moving forward into this period of economic doldrums, one would have to say that the practice of providing cheap money to people to create economic growth and then making them pay for that money through taxes at the same time does not seem to be working to create real economic growth. So in the last point here is economic growth is caused by increasing the resources available or by producing better technology. And this pushes that production possibilities curve outward. We already talked about that. We're going to talk more about growth. We're going to talk more about taxes. We're going to talk more about creating free money, cheap money, in later chapters. We're really going to dig into all those issues. So you can see how the production possibilities curve can be expanded by increases in technology, more money, all the things we just out. Okay, finally, there's 3 basic decisions to be made in economics: what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce. So you got to decide what to make, how you're going to make it, and who it's for. We talked about this at the very beginning. And this decision is, once again, typically driven by money. You have to decide what you're going to produce. When you decide what you're going to produce, you need to pick something that's going to generate the most revenue, the most interest, the most sales. How you make it, you want to make it as cheaply as possible while still having something that's other people want. And who are you making it for? You want to have as broad an audience as possible, or if you're going to have a narrow audience, you want to make sure a very high percentage of them really want your product. So you want to make something for everybody. If you want to make something for everybody, you may grow fruit. I mean, everybody is a consumer at that point. Or you want to make a product that's for a very narrow population, but generates tremendous amounts of revenue for you. I think of ultra exotic, high-end luxury automobiles, like a high-end Bentley. You're looking at $500,000 for a car. You have a very narrow group of people who can afford that. But when they do purchase it, there's a very large profit margin for you there. So those are the 3 questions we need to answer, the three basic decisions in economics. All right, that's it for part 2.